everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in this video I'm going to show you how I made this pinafore dress using this really cute sunflower print fabric that I found at a thrift store for about 10 euros. And I also have like a lot of the fabric left, so I'm thinking about making like another skirt or a tote bag or something from the leftovers. I don't know yet, but we'll see. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started. This is how much fabric I had in the beginning, but for this pinafore dress I only ended up using about half of one piece of fabric. So let me know in the comments if you have any ideas for what I could do with the rest. And since the fabric was already nicely hemmed, I decided to use this edge as the hem of my dress. But before we get into any sewing, let's have a little pinafore dress 101. Essentially, a pinafore dress consists of a skirt and a front piece. And for the skirt you'll need to know your waist measurement for the waistband and how long you want your dress to be. Then just add a couple of centimeters or 1 inch to these measurements. Because I'm making a ruched rectangle skirt, the width of the skirt fabric will be about 3 times my waist measurement before the ruching. And as for the front piece, you'll need 2 front flap pieces, I guess you could call them, which are basically 2 fabric squares, as well as 2 shoulder straps. On my pinafore dress, I wanted the front pieces to be detachable, so instead of sewing them onto the skirt, I added buttons to the inside of the waistband and buttonholes on the front piece, as well as the straps in the back. And I kinda wish I'd added pockets, but I was just too lazy to do that, but it would have been super cute and practical. So anyways, I started by measuring the length of the skirt part, which for me was 51 centimeters plus a 2 centimeter seam allowance, and drew markings along the fabric. And then I just cut along those markings. This side will become the part attached to the waistband. Then I sewed a zigzag stitch along the top of the fabric to prevent any possible fraying. Next, I sewed a wide length straight stitch just below the zigzag, but without backstitching, which will then allow me to gather the fabric and create the ruching. And here you can see me starting the long and arduous process of gathering the fabric by pulling the bottom thread away from the fabric and tugging the fabric gently in the other direction. And once I had finally gotten the fabric gathered, I measured to make sure it was as long as my waist measurement. Next, I started working on the waistband by measuring a 15 x 73 strip of fabric and cutting it out. Then I folded it right sides together and ironed a piece of fusible interfacing on one side. This will make the waistband hold its shape. And after ironing, I sewed a straight stitch along the free edges of the waistband. After turning the waistband inside out, it looked like this. Next, I went on to attach the waistband to the skirt. I wanted the seam to be hidden inside the skirt, so I pinned the skirt onto the waistband with the seam facing up. This way it'll be neatly hidden on the inside of the skirt. I also left about half a centimeter of the waistband hanging above the skirt edge, so that once turned it would hide the seams inside nicely. Then I simply sewed the waistband and skirt together with a straight stitch. You'll want to sew below the zigzag stitch and ruching stitch of the skirt so that they won't be visible on the front side of the dress. Then I sewed a zipper to the back of the dress using a zipper foot. I hadn't sewed that many zippers before, so I tried to take it slow and do my best to sew it on straight. As I got closer to the bottom, I closed the zipper up to make the rest of the sewing easier. After the zipper, I finished sewing the back seam with a straight stitch. And with that, I was finished with the skirt. Next, I went on to make the front piece of my pinafore. First, I measured approximately how big I wanted my front piece to be and cut out 2 squares with those measurements. And you can easily make this part as big or small as you want. With the right sides facing in, I sewed the edges, leaving only a small gap, which would allow me to turn the piece around. And for the corners, I left the needle in, lifted the foot and turned the fabric 90 degrees. After I was done, I snipped the excess fabric off the corners and began turning the piece inside out. I used a ruler to help me push the edges and the corners out, and then I hand sewed the gap closed as neatly as I could. For the pinafore body to be detachable, I needed 3 of these buttons. I began by placing the buttons evenly on the front piece and marking the spots where I wanted my buttonholes to go. Then I cut a small slit between the markings with a utility knife and hand sewed the edges of the slit to finish all of the buttonholes. Next, I figured out the spot where I would want the straps to attach. I used jean buttons and these shoulder strap buckles and marked the spot for the button with a pen. Then I just pressed both the back and front parts of the button together through the fabric. You'll need to use a little bit of force for this part, but it'll turn out looking pretty neat. Then, to sew the buttons onto the waistband, I placed the front piece inside the waistband, making sure it was exactly in the center. Then I drew a line through the buttonholes to mark where I would need to sew the buttons. And next, I sewed the buttons inside the waistband, trying not to go through to the front side of the skirt with the needle. Then I got to work on the shoulder straps, which is basically the same process as the waistband. Only differences are the length and width, which for me were 60 x 10 centimeters, and the fact that you need to make 2 of these. But anyway, I sewed these with a straight stitch, just like with the waistband, and turned them inside out. To make the ends look neater, I turned them in about 1 centimeter and sewed the remaining hole shut with a straight stitch. And here you can see me repeating the buttonhole process on the straps and sewing the buttons on the inside of the waistband to the back of the skirt, same way I did with the front piece of the dress. I also decided to sew buttons to the front of the straps. I only sewed 1 pair of buttons, but by sewing 2 buttons on each strap, you'd be able to adjust the strap length. And here you can see all of the buttons I sewed to make the front piece and straps detachable. And here's the end result. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it, and if you did, you can always leave a like or a comment down below, or also subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my content. So that's it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!